Hello, everyone. This is the pre-recorded lecture for the RLS223 Leisure and Human Behavior Chapter 4, Lecture 2. It's the substitution for the in-person class on Monday, the January 30th, because I'll be away for my work trip. So I hope, sorry again for this arrangement, and I hope you actually can enjoy a little bit of sleeping in on a Monday morning. Now, in this lecture, we're going to keep talking about the common experiences during leisure, specifically some of the common emotions, starting with the interest. So according to the chapter, interest is called knowledge emotion, and it's one of the common experiences that we have in leisure experiences. Now, there is this theory called appraisal theory, according to Sylvia, and that was explained in a chapter. And this theory explains how we actually get interested in something, including leisure activity, leisure stuff. Sometimes, it's a book or music or whatever. So there are two steps or two important elements to the process in which we become interested in. And first is that we must perceive the activity or object or whatever to be new, something new to you, ambiguous sometimes, complex. It's really difficult to understand. That's the key. Obscure, something even like strange, uncertain, mysterious, contradictory. Again, it's complex, complicated, and unexpected. So there's a bit of a maybe surprise element. So that's one factor. But at the same time, we have to feel the second factor, that we have the potential, the capacity to comprehend it, to understand it. Okay, so that mixture of the both difficulty and ability, perceived ability to be able to understand it, are the keys to the process through which we understand we become interested in something. Now, Sylvia's study was an interesting one, which used a poem, which was called "The Whitest Parts of the Body," and apparently it was German poem or something like that. So it doesn't translate English well, probably. And I think there's a bit of actual poem in a chapter. So if you're interested in, you can just explore that. You can Google search that. But so the title sounds very obscure in English. Participants who found that to be obscure, mysterious, complex, so on and so forth, the first part checked off. But the participants who felt that they could understand the poem felt more interested in the poem, reading it, than those who felt that they could not understand it. So this being able to understand or feeling that they could understand is very important part of us getting interested in stuff. Now, the Siddiqs and colleagues experience sampling method study. They compare different domains of life: leisure, paid work, housework / survival, like eating, sleeping, those things. And they measured basically naturally occurring emotions, like different kind of emotions. And one of them was interest. And they found that people reported the strongest, the highest level of interest on average in the leisure domain. And that's not probably, that means probably leisure offers those combination of difficulty, complexity, and being able to understand probably. This study another one about interest, and a study conducted by a Dutch scholar called Andre Mites. He is basically, he followed groups of people who went to leisure travels. One group went to Civil War Museum. The other one went to Model Airplane Museum, and they were actually in the Pennsylvania, US. Anyway, and these researchers monitored people's positive emotions, a couple different things. On the right side, you can see interest, love, joy, and contentment. These are the 4 emotions that they tracked. And they tracked from the weekend before, through the week, and to the weekend in which they traveled to those museums, and then the week and weekend afterwards as well. And what they found was that there's something called a peak model or reverse U model, that positive emotions spiked from a little before the actual travel. So that's a little bit of key. Okay, a little before the travel, people anticipated the experience and increased their positive emotions. And then the positive emotion toward the end of the experience, even before leaving museum, the positive emotion started to kind of drop down and it went to the base level or even like a little lower than base level. And that was the pattern. So really, well, this study showed to an extent that the impact on the positive emotions by the leisure travels and maybe some other leisure experiences aren't necessarily sustainable much. But at the same time, what's very interesting here is that across the 4 emotions that Mitas and colleagues measured, tracked, interest, which is that broken line, with their red arrow going in, that showed the most sensitive, most, exaggerated, sharp increase during the leisure time. So this was a context of museum, basically visitation, but maybe at least for that leisure context, interest may be particularly important. That's the maybe, one of the factors and experience that's driving maybe people's satisfaction with those experiences, for example. So if you are working in those hospitality context or tourism industry, interest is one of the key emotions that we have to track. And we want to use that appraisal theory to help people design the program, design the facility in such a way that people can feel interested in. Now, here's a bit of a reflection activity. I want you to think about how were your emotional experiences during your last trip. Maybe that was to, I don't know, Jasper or some mountain or some countryside over there in Alberta or Saskatchewan or something. Or you went to the States maybe, or you went to the went across to the Europe or Asia, something. Think about it. What did you experience? Recall your emotions, and maybe you can chart them, like Mitas' study from the before trip to the during the trip, mid trip, to the post trip period. Did it kind of go up and down, like Mitas and colleagues found? Were all the emotions relevant to your trip were positive? Was everything positive, or was there any negative emotions like anxiety, stress, even like fear? And these are the important points that we're going to come back to toward the end of the chapter when we talk about are all leisure experiences positive? Do they have to be positive? And also, leisure is not just the immediate conscious experience, but experience happen before and after those activities. We're going to come back to this. Now, keep talking about interest. The chapter linked interest to intrinsic motivation. So to quickly recap what intrinsic motivation is, it is doing something, an activity, behavior, for its own sake, okay? And that's one of the key defining factor of leisure. So when people feel intrinsic motivation, they tend to consider that activity as a leisure. That's what it is, okay? And doing something for its own sake means that, for example, I cook because, let's say, I enjoy cooking, at least certain dishes maybe, right? In a certain time. I just enjoy it, just purely. But if I started to cook because, well, I can put the picture of dishes on an Instagram, for example, now that's extrinsic because putting it off on Instagram and quote unquote showing it off, that's different from doing the activity itself, right? So that there is a ulterior basically motive to activity. Now, research suggests that people tend to feel intrinsically motivated for the activities in which they felt interested in. So interest is, again, very, very important emotion, because when people are intrinsically motivated, they want to do that activity again. They would consider that experience as leisure too. And that means if, let's say, you work for a certain tourism agent destination or park or sports program, whatever, and if you could facilitate the feeling of interest, that means people, your customers, will feel intrinsically motivated for doing the activity, coming to your facility program again, which is always great. And also they would consider your experience, the service, as a leisure strongly. And that's probably what you want. Now, going back to the circumplex model of the affect, maybe you can ask, where is interest? You didn't see it. I didn't see it actually either. So I had to track down all different versions of the circumplex model over the past 30, 40 years, basically. And I couldn't really see interest either. So what I came to think about is that maybe interest is has some subtypes. Like, for example, watching new, let's say, Doctor Strange movie. There's a fantasy, there's a cool, computer graphics and boom, and bang, and all that colors and everything else. So it's very exciting, if you will. It's a positive, but it's arousing, activating, if you will. Now, versus listening to your, let's say, grandma's story about, when she was, let's say, younger, right? Probably it's not like Doctor Strange movie, that it's rather maybe more peaceful, calming, maybe, there's some exciting, stories and nuggets of stories there, but, overall, maybe that, grandma telling you the story is more of a calming experience. It's interesting though, nonetheless. So maybe interest has that both high arousal and low arousal side on the positive side. Another possible issue is that interest is quite a bit of a multi-phased experience emotion. That we talked about the appraisal theory and the first step and second step, or first factor, second factor, that it's complex, it's mysterious, obscure even sometimes, and then we can understand it. So like a good story, good interesting, captivating movie story or book story, whatever, it gives you some mystery, something difficult to understand, a complexity, which maybe actually puzzles you, which is not necessarily a good experience per se. But then there's this big release that, the mystery all gets resolved and everything makes sense. And then you go, aha, and that's a positive. So maybe even interest has that in terms of balance, it kind of shift and move in one experience too. Maybe that's what interest is. And that's why maybe circumplex model struggles to capture that where it is basically. But if I have to say, I think this blue broken line area, that the both higher arousal and lower arousal positive side, and maybe neutral because, average it out and it's neutral. So that's where probably interest is. The second common emotion observed in leisure that we learn about is excitement. Excitement is a type of high arousal positive HAP. Okay. Now, chapter defines excitement as arousal extended to upper levels just short of the anxiety and fear, and maybe even crossing that line on occasion, depending on. And you can see this little bell curve kind of things, and there, your arousal level goes up, and there's, comfortable optimal level, and there's anxiety level, and there's a threshold typically for each individual. And that threshold is different for each individual. Basically, we know that actually neurologically we're different. And then just short of that threshold, right, to the optimal side, or even stepping into that anxiety side time to time, depending on the context, is where the excitement exists. Now, some people tend to pursue excitement more, and that relates back to the basically each individual have actually different threshold to the anxiety, basically, okay, where we can feel excitement. Excitement seeking or sensation seeking is linked to extroversion, which is a personality trait we're going to talk about in chapter 7. We choose thrilling leisure activities, certain kind of leisure activities to feel excited, such as, great example, skydiving, right? And also sometimes things like gambling. It's a different kind of a thrill, different kind of sensation, but that uncertainty and a potential, the possibility to winning big money, for example. The research, the chapter talked about research about excitement through college football among female athletes. Now, that, typical sports, those common sports can be some of the activity through which we get excitement. But also excitement seeking, sensation seeking as a tendency, as a personality trait, is related to actually risky health behavior, such as using drug, alcohol, and to an extent that's more abusive, and also unprotected sex and those behaviors as well. So there is actually public health elements and issues related to the emotion of excitement and to what extent we crave for that emotion. So if you work for those, industry like public health, for example, excitement is a very important thing to think about. Related to excitement, which chapter didn't talk about, is novelty. It's more of a newer research. Novelty is proposed as a new basic psychological need. I mean, it's not that we're having this new need, we're not developing a new need, but we didn't know about it before. Now we think it's part of the basic psychological need. And we're going to talk about that in chapter 5, which is about leisure needs, okay? And novelty is closely linked to excitement. You can see that in this definition of novelty. Novelty is defined as the individual perception of experiencing or doing something new, including switching things up, like spicing it up, your daily life, basically, right? Going out of your routine, basically. So you can see how that could help you feel a little bit of excitement, right? And also research shows that the novelty seeking was long recognized, especially in the tourism literature, as a one of the major motivation for leisure travel, that you want to go to savannah in Africa to see this, wildlife. Novelty seeking is one of those, motivation for many of us. And that tends to, probably if you see lions and giraffe and all that, probably you feel excited. And that's why the link between novelty seeking, and excitement is there. Now, the chapter asks us to be able to distinguish excitement from flow. Now, we haven't quite covered flow, but I expect you to know something about flow from the RLS 100 and whatnot. So we should be good to do this. Now, in chapter 4, we discuss many seemingly similar phenomena. So it's important for you to be able to differentiate them, not just excitement and flow, but overall, for the exam's sake as well. Now, here are key differences between excitement and flow. First of all, excitement is a common experience. We're talking here in this section of the chapter, common leisure experiences, right? Excitement is nothing rare. It happens every day. It could be, okay? Now, it's more common than flow, especially because flow is, later on, we're going to define it as one of the psychologically deep experiences, which is one of those rare, uncommon experiences in a daily life. Okay, so definitely excitement is more common. Secondly, flow requires a high level of skill, and the person feeling the control over, one of the characteristics of flow was that the person feels that they're in a zone, they cannot fail with the activity. They have this absolute confidence in their performance and skills and whatnot, right? That means, but sometimes for excitement, that's not a requirement. Having that, high level of skill, feeling that absolute control, because sometimes we actually relinquish control to feel excited. Think about it. Let's say skydiving, but you're not skydiver, so you have to go with those, professional, basically, those people who can, dive with you, basically. They're the one who pull. I'm assuming they're the one who pull. I would never skydive because I'm so chicken, basically. But I'm assuming they have that control, basically, right? You may feel like you have a control, but no, that professional has everything under control. So you're basically giving up your control. I mean, if that person screws up, you're going to, you're in a big trouble, basically, right? So you're giving up your control to feel excited. Gambling is a good example too. There's literally no skill, except the counting cards and stuff like that, which you're not supposed to be doing, right? So basically no control, you're giving up control to the chance, and you get that excitement. So that's very different too. Later on, you're gonna see this flow model, the 8-channel model here. Flow is right top corner here, red, right? Skill and the challenge level match up. Now, excitement is located in this top middle arousal channel. So once again, from the flow perspective, flow theory, these two are very different experiences. They're neighbors, but they're different than the rest. Opposite of excitement is relaxation. Relaxation is a type of LAP, low arousal, positive. which is about bringing arousal and activation down. Right? Often involves detaching, separating yourself from stimulating or stressful circumstances like work, education, sometimes family. People also tend to define their activity as leisure when they feel relaxed. So work on one study found that Susan Show's 1984 time use diary we talked about in chapter 3 also found that same finding as well. Now, this detachment piece seems to be very important. Implies that use of leisure as some level of escape, escapism, escaping, staying away from the causes of stress, okay? And one of the studies that supports that is people listen to music and they studied basically motivation for why people listening to music, basically. And for the most people, actually, they didn't listen to music to enjoy that specific whatever music. They listened to music to feel relaxed. It was a coping method. It was the relaxation strategy. Okay, so there's a bit of escape in there. Now, Sabine Sonntag, I think they're from the Northern Europe, Finland, I think. But they are organizational psychologists, basically, psychologists of the workers and companies and, work, basically. And they're some of the leading scholars who did a lot of work around how psychological detachment from work could be enhanced, basically, so that they found these 4 factors that helped workers and employees recover better from work. One of the key factors was psychological detachment. It's about forgetting about work. Okay, that's very important. I'm going to come back to that. Second was control, the sense of control during leisure. That whatever you do during leisure, you feel that you decide, you choose, you have the freedom, you have autonomy, and so that's a choice freedom, basically, right? Freedom to do. Third element was mastery during leisure, that you do certain leisure activity that challenges you, that there's difficulties, but you can develop your skills and maybe achieve certain goals. And that's what the mastery was for them. And then finally, relaxation, that you feel relaxed during leisure. Now, this research has interesting implications. First of all, this means that getting off the work, as in like you're leaving the office, for example, physically detaching yourself from work, which is of course getting more and more difficult with the COVID and working from home, but it's not necessarily same as psychological detachment. Make sense? Leaving the office doesn't mean you're not thinking about work, is it? Because especially with the technology and constant emails and social medias and whatnot, you're connected with the colleagues and whatnot. Those people can remind you, whether intentionally or not intentionally. Email is very intentional, but social media posts and stuff could be unintentional. But anyway, they can remind you of work, right? So that you're off the work, you're not working, you're at home maybe, but you have to sometimes still think about work. And that's not helpful from their perspective. Based on their research, that's not healthy. And that's why a lot of companies do this, no email over, weekend or vacation type of policy. And this is why this is very important. It's based on the science. Now, another key is that psychological detachment is related to, but it's not exactly the same as relaxation. What do we mean by that? For example, think about, actually research shows that the flow-like experience, absorptive and your skill and, challenges matching can help people detach from ordinary life, including work and work stress. Because when you're in the flow, you're focused, you're hyper-focused on the activity you're doing, right? You're not thinking in anything else. If you are, you're out of flow, okay? So that means that flow can be, because it's challenging and everything, it can be quite a stimulating experience as well. It's not relaxing the experience. We can actually go back to the flow model here. Relaxation is the right bottom, flow is the right top, okay? So there are 2 different experiences, but going through something very stimulating and activating like a flow actually help us to do psychological detachment, but obviously it's not going to help relaxation, because relaxation is about bringing your activation down, deactivating basically, right? So there are two different things. So there are a couple different, really nuanced different things, but they work together well. And really understanding each of those things and when it's happening, what it is very important to facilitate each things, depending on the situation, depending on a need. You're the manager, you need, okay, psychological detachment for your, subordinates, colleagues. How do we do that? You can think about maybe technologies and, constant emails and whatnot, basically. Now, related to relaxation, the chapter mentioned Rollo May's work. I think Rollo was it North American or East European? Anyway, philosophers / psychologists. They had this idea, and actually we mentioned them in the RLS 100 briefly too. They had this idea of what's called a pause. Pause helps us appreciating and finding an opportunity to wonder. It's just being open to things, whether activities or people, or maybe they're going to different places, different experiences coming to you rather than you purchase it, you are pursuing them. Pause is about resisting and they're interrupting your constant hassle of going from one thing to another. Right? You look at the Google Calendar, maybe your schedule. You have so many schedule, and your daily life is like just going through your to-do list. Check off, 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 and you're home, you're done. Do you have everyday life like that? And that's the complete opposite of having pause. Pause is disrupting that. Pause is about taking a step back from that. So this is why May criticized the American, or even maybe Canadian, North American these days, way of conceptualizing and having leisure, which is about doing activity, doing a recreation activity. So this relates to leisure as recreation activity. Leisure is defined as doing something, you're doing basketball, you're doing workout, you're doing watching, movies, so you're doing leisure. If not, it's not leisure. That type of perspective. May did not like that idea, okay? Because pause is about having the state of contemplation, or at least it may look like doing nothing, but it's just having that state of openness. Another philosopher of leisure and religion, actually, Joseph Piper, similarly considered leisure as being receptive rather than active. Okay, we're actively pursuing and doing things. That was not what the leisure was for the Joseph Piper either. Leisure was for them being receptive, being open to the things that are happening around you, basically, whether activity, people, whatever that might be, but being open to it. It's not the same as being passive. You're alert and aware, and you're open. Make sense? Hopefully that's different. Now, this is why relaxation, and also especially the concept of pose, is related to this quite a fashionable, actually, people very popular these days, the concept of mindfulness. You may have heard about mindfulness, probably. You might have tried to practice mindfulness as well, which is also increasingly studied in social psychology of leisure as well, especially in outdoor recreation setting. I'm going to get to that. Now, mindfulness is defined as the state of being attentive to and aware of what is taking place in the moment here and now. It involves both external and internal environment. So you're being aware of what's happening outside of you, right? Socially, environmentally, but also internally inside of you, as in both thoughts, feelings, maybe sometimes even like physiological responses, like, your pulse, your sensations, your breathing, so on and so forth. It's a big part of mindfulness as well. Mindfulness is about accepting situation without judgment. So you're aware, you know what's going on, you acknowledge that, but you don't dwell on it. You don't think about why, what if, those questions, those questions that we can basically never answer potentially, and it doesn't really lead to sometimes anything, and you try not to engage in those thoughts, okay? Just a little caveat, a little note here that basically mindfulness can be conceptualized and has been actually conceptualized as both state, which is what we're talking about, okay? State is temporary, it's a situation or experience, versus trait, which is like personality, okay? More sustainable over time. We're gonna talk about that in chapter 7, that personality side of mindfulness in chapter 7. Now, mindfulness, both state and the trait actually, has been linked to, especially certain kind of leisure, outdoor recreation. Being out there in a beautiful nature, doing something there. For example, my student at the actually previous university, Ethan Blumhost and I, we conducted a study with the adaptive scuba diving. It's adaptive scuba, so I don't know if you know adaptive scuba diving. It's adaptive because it's for people with disabilities, and specifically in this context, it was for veterans, military veterans with the mental and physical impairments. So, for example, in this picture, you can see some of the people went through the amputation, right? They don't have certain part of the limb. So maybe you don't have a leg, so you can't propel your body well. Then you will wear certain gloves that has actually more. It's like a frog, right? It has a, I don't know, something in between the fingers, basically. So you can actually grab the water better. You can propel your body. You can move around, swim in the water better, for example. There are different hand signaling or different, actually, you don't sometimes have a hand, so, or fingers. So you use a different signaling system, for example. There are different ways to make scuba diving more accessible. Anyway, so Ethan, my student, who followed a group of people, veterans and scuba diving coaches and whatnot, who are going to different places in North America, but including Mexico, Cozumel, very beautiful place. If you want to ever scuba diving in a beautiful ocean, that's Cozumel, Mexico is one of the places to go. Anyway, so it was great research for him. And he followed them and he measured his mindfulness and other things, among other things, before and after 45 minutes adaptive scuba diving session, okay, 45 minutes. But we observed significant elevation, significant increase in the state level mindfulness among veterans with their mental health and mental and their physical impairment, which was very important for them because with, for example, chronic pain, physical pain, basically they were constantly, it was a challenge for them to be mindful because the pain was so much, pain was so constant. Mental health issues like a PTSD is really gives you a flashback and so many other hyper vigilance and other things that actually make them difficult from being for being mindful in day-to-day life. So something that like adaptive scuba diving and feeling that increased mindfulness was very, very important for them. Now we had to think about why. So, okay, we found that evidence, but now we have to, theorize why scuba helped them in terms of mindfulness. Our theory was this: the scuba diving forces deep, slow, steady breathing. If you ever dived, that's what we have to do, because otherwise you're going to run out of oxygen. You can't dive so long, okay? So you have to do the slow, deep breathing. Not necessarily like slow breathing is important in a mindfulness and meditation, but the breathing, at least, is a very, very important part of mindfulness practice. And now what's unique is that you have to be aware of your breathing, okay? And there, in a scuba context, in under the water, you can clearly hear, and actually your breathing is pretty much the only thing you can hear. So you're very, very aware of your breathing. And that can be a focal point, that focus of meditative thoughts and the state and experience, basically, okay? So that's the thought, that's the theory here. Now you learn both excitement and relaxation. And I wanted to pose this question to you. We learned both excitement and relaxation, and then that they're kind of polar opposite, right? Now, do you think you in your personal life right now have a good balance of excitement and relaxation? Probably we should, right? What's your balance? How is it? Is it good? Not good? If not good, how not good? Which one is more over experience, if you will. Secondly, do you think your society provides opportunity for both excitement and relaxation in a balanced way? Or are we actually biased toward one way or another, right? And if we are biased, if we are out of balance, what kind of leisure programs can we provide, and we can help people experience the type of emotion that's maybe lacking in our society? What do you think? This seems to be a very important question to answer moving into the future marketing purposes as well as the programming purposes to get the kind of emotions. Anyway, so I'm going to leave you with this. Well, I'm going to leave you to this and we will talk about this hopefully the next in-person class Wednesday with this discussion. Now, let me go a little more, a few more minutes we have. So the last emotion we talked about, okay, what we talked about in this chapter is happiness. Now, happiness can be defined in a couple of different ways, okay? Happiness can be more of a thinking rather than feeling, but here we're talking about happiness as a positive emotion, positive effect that is neutral in arousal. So it's like, you know, a circumflex model. It's the right side, well, I guess from your side, this, I don't know, right side and somewhere middle, okay? Although we may associate happiness to high arousal, positive, chapter says that actually happiness motivates people to stick with the sure bet, to go with what was safe, what was fun, what was rewarding the last time. So we know it's going to work. We know it's going to make you happy. And to me, probably watching the, you know, the same basically sitcoms like, you know, Friends and How I Met Your Mother, those things that I know I enjoy. I've have fun with it over and over. Like I watch them like 5 times, 9 times, and 10 times the whole seasons. And then my wife goes like, why do you want to watch it? Well, probably that's because that's why, you know, this is why it makes me happy. Siddiq's and colleagues ESM, experience sampling method study, also measured happiness and compared across life domains. And once again, people felt the highest level of happiness in leisure compared to work or compared to housework / survival. So leisure is characterized by happiness. Happiness is common experience during leisure. Now here's a bit of a pop quiz. Which days in a week do you feel happier? Do you think we feel typically, you know, we in general feel happier? Maybe that's an easy one. Which days in a week, right? What time from like 0 a.m. to, you know, midnight? What time in a weekday do we tend to feel happier, generally speaking? Okay. And what activities tends to make us happier? What do you think? I will do, well, actually, I'm not going to do these pop quiz, but pause here, think about it quickly, because you're going to know the answer on the next slide. Now, I use experience sampling methods to actually follow 83 university students in Japan for about a week, and we collected like over 2,200 experiences across, you know, many people. Now, I follow the happiness. I monitored happiness. Now, happiness is, which is a blue line, by the way, here. Okay, orange is actually what is in Japanese called ikigai. It's a life worth living. So it's a little different actually from happiness, but we're focusing on blue here. Happiness was particularly high on Saturday and Sunday, especially Saturday was the highest. It was significantly, Saturday's happiness level was significantly higher Monday. Monday was a comparison reference point. And Saturday was the only day that was significantly elevated. Okay, so when in your week, most likely you feel happiest on Saturday. Sunday, you're kind of declining. Why? Because you know Monday is coming. And that's the hard part of our life, isn't it? Now, what about, you know, during a week? Well, happiness is elevated, blue line once again from 8 a.m. to actually 10 p.m. this data is. Happiness was elevated 2 points, basically lunchtime. You know, you're eating some food, favorite food. You're off to work, you're off to study. You're maybe mingling and socializing with your colleagues, your friends and whatnot, right? So that's why maybe it's, and then the evening, 6 p.m. on, that you're off the work, you're off the study, hopefully, maybe not. And then you're having dinner, maybe you're seeing family members and friends, doing some activity that make you happy, probably watching TV, watching movie, playing video games, doing yoga, I don't know. So these are the 2 time points. In a weekday, happiness was inflated. Now this is the basically, not my study actually, Bryson and McCarran study from UK, which is a massive, massive experience sampling methods with over 20,000 participants. Left side is a top 10 activity that are most strongly correlated with the happiness. Top 3 here is intimacy, yes, and including sex as well, was probably not surprising. By far, the happiness-inducing activity. Second was theater, dancing, concert, so attending them, basically. And third was exhibitions, arts gallery, museum, those things, visiting them too. So it's actually quite a bit of cultural activity was also there too. And the fourth was actually sports, running, exercise. So sports is higher up there, but not quite there like a cultural activities, even beyond that. Now on the right side of the table, you see the bottom 10 activity least correlated. So some of them are unrelated, some of them are negatively related, like at the bottom, being sick or working, studying, they actually make you unhappy, like less happy. Now at the top of the right side, browsing internet, social media, texting, email, they're almost near like zero correlation, near zero correlation. So they're unrelated to happiness. What kind of activity are you doing? Are you doing more of a right side? Or are you doing more of a left side? Think about that. Okay. Now, happiness is similar to happiness. Fun, enjoyment is a form of positive emotion that is neutral in arousal, and it's related. Chapter talked about it too in relation to happiness. And this fun and enjoyment and also happiness is often part of this certain kind of leisure, what we call it in the field, casual leisure, which is the opposite to basically serious leisure. We're going to talk about this more in later in the chapter, actually chapter 4 and so on. But here, I'm going to define casual leisure. It's immediately intrinsically rewarding, and it's relatively short time, pleasurable activity. So it's right there, pleasurable, requiring a little to no special training to enjoy it. Enjoyment is very important. It's fundamentally hedonic. Hedonic as in focus on the pleasure, focus on here and now. It's not about long-term goals. And here are the 8 main types of casual leisure that the Bob Stebbins, the guy who is famous for serious leisure, identified. You don't have to remember everything, but the few interesting study experiences here. I would go with the play being very prototypical casual leisure, and it's source of happiness, source of fun. Social conversation on the right side. It's very important source of actually the fun as well. Some of the entertainment, left side, active entertainment, passive entertainment seems to correspond with the Bryson's happiness study as well, some of the cultural activity, right? And then on the right side, again, sensory stimulation, sex, eating, drinking, those things. Well, there's intimacy and whatnot at the top of the chart as well in the Bryson study. So it corresponds as well. So maybe casual leisure is very happiness inducing as well. And now that, my friends, is the end of chapter 4, at least for the midterm exam. And that's the part basically you have to cover. Not anymore. We're good here. We're going to stop it. We're going to do some activity discussions and whatnot that we talked about in this video in the next Wednesday class. And that will be it. All right. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you have a good weekend, a good Monday, and I'll see you on Wednesday.